Have you ever tried to describe something that's, well, truly one of a kind, like a color nobody's ever seen or a sound nobody's ever heard? It's pretty much impossible, right? You have to use comparisons. You say, it's like this, or it's kind of like that. Today, we are tackling the ultimate version of that challenge, trying to wrap our minds around a God who is, by definition, in a category all by himself. So how do we even begin to talk about a God like that? Let's get into it.
I bet you've heard this one before, maybe way back in Sunday school. It's a classic attempt to explain the Trinity, this idea of one God in three persons. And, it's simple, it's something we can picture, and at first glance, it almost seems to work.
But this is where that simple analogy just completely falls apart. See, an egg is made of three different parts. The shell isn't the yolk isn't the white, but the Bible's claim is that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit aren't just 1/3 of God each. And this is the key. Each person is fully God. It's not 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It's more like 1 × 1 × 1 = 1. So that egg analogy, it actually describes an ancient heresy called partialism. Whoops.
All right. So let's try another really popular one, H2O. God is like water, which can be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. This one's a little better because each form is still 100% H2O. But it fails in a totally different way. Water changes its state. Ice has to melt to become liquid. But the Father doesn't become the Son, and the Son doesn't become the Spirit. They're three distinct persons who exist at the exact same time for all eternity. And this really gets us to the heart of the problem. It doesn't matter if you use an egg or water or, a three-leaf clover. Every single illustration we come up with is going to fall short. And that's because all our illustrations are pulled from the world that we know, the created world. But God, he's not in the created world. He's the one who created it.
So the fact that our analogies keep failing isn't just because we're not clever enough. It's actually a huge signpost. It's pointing to a really profound, fundamental truth about who God is. And it's a truth that's, well, it's both incredible and, as we're about to see, kind of terrifying when you really get it. And that is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? If we can't use the things we know to understand him, how on earth can we know anything about him at all? This is where we have to completely flip our perspective. We have to stop trying to build a ladder up to God and start looking for how he has revealed himself down to us. The one biblical word that really captures this idea of God's uniqueness is holiness. Now, we usually think holy just means, morally perfect or super good, and it definitely includes that, but its original core meaning is way more radical. The root word literally means to be cut off or separate. It means to be in a category of one, utterly unique. Now, to get a feel for what this really looks like, let's jump into one of the most mind-blowing scenes in the entire Bible. There's a prophet, his name is Isaiah. He's just hanging out in the temple, and all of a sudden he gets this vision. He sees the Lord himself, the King of the universe, sitting on a throne, just radiating glory. And just his presence, just him being there, causes creation itself to have this immediate, violent reaction. The foundations of this huge stone temple start to shake and tremble. This isn't just a gentle hum. It's a full-on cosmic earthquake, triggered by the sheer weight of God's reality. And if an earthquake wasn't enough, the whole place starts to fill with thick, heavy smoke. We're not talking about some cozy campfire smoke here. This is the kind of smoke that pours off an overwhelming, unapproachable, intensely powerful fire. This was not a warm, fuzzy moment. This was raw, untamed, terrifying glory. So this terrifying vision leads to an immediate, gut-level human reaction. And that reaction tells us everything we need to know about what happens when our imperfect reality crashes into absolute holiness. Just look at Isaiah's first words. He doesn't say, wow, this is amazing. He doesn't go, I feel so special. No, he completely unravels. The first thing out of his mouth is, I am ruined. It's over for me. In the blinding light of God's pure perfection, all of his own imperfections became painfully, crushingly obvious. And this just perfectly shows the massive gap between how we usually think about God and what the Bible actually says. We tend to imagine God as just being at the very top of our food chain, a better, stronger, smarter version of us. But biblical holiness says, nope, Not even close. God isn't in our reality at all. He's in a different reality altogether, the uncreated reality that exists outside our universe and brought it all into being. And that right there is the crisis. If God's very nature is that pure, that separate, it acts like a consuming fire. Anything that is not holy, anything flawed or broken like us, just can't survive in his presence. It's like a moth trying to fly into the sun. It's just not going to end well. So is that the end of the story? A holy God on one side, ruined humanity on the other, with this uncrossable chasm in between? I mean, if that was it, it would be the ultimate tragedy. But it's not the end. In fact, it's the story's major turning point. This is the fundamental problem of being human, isn't it? Isaiah's cry, "I am ruined," is really the only honest answer we've got on our own. There's nothing we can do to make ourselves clean enough to stand in the presence of that consuming fire. So how do we ever bridge that gap? And this is where the entire story flips on its head. The whole point of the Bible isn't about our heroic quest to find God. It's actually the story of the holy God taking the initiative to come down, to cross that chasm and make himself known to us. So how did he do it? How did this unknowable God make himself known? Well, the central claim of Christianity is that he did it perfectly, in the person of Jesus. See, Jesus isn't another flawed analogy, like an egg or a glass of water. The Bible claims he is the perfect picture, the exact representation of God's very being, made visible and understandable for you and me. And that revelation, well, it changes absolutely everything. It takes this big abstract idea of God's holiness and makes it deeply personal. It transforms that problem of the consuming fire into the possibility of a refining fire. So what do we do with all this? It really boils down to 3 simple steps. First, we got to be humble enough to admit our own ideas and analogies are never going to be enough. Second, we turn our attention to the one perfect picture God has given us, Jesus. And third, we have to be willing to be changed by that encounter. And this slide really sums up the 2 paths forward. For anyone who tries to approach God on their own terms, his holiness is always going to be a consuming fire, just like it was for Isaiah at first. But for those of us who trust in the bridge God built for us, the sacrifice of Jesus, that very same fire becomes a refining fire, one that doesn't destroy us, but actually purifies us and makes us clean. And what's just incredible is that for those who've been cleansed, God gives this brand new command. It's no longer this impossible standard that just crushes us. Instead, it becomes an invitation, a call to reflect the character of the one who saved us, to be cut off and distinct from the world, just like he is. And that leaves us with one last pretty big question. You know, it's really easy to worship a God that we've made up in our own minds, one who is familiar and predictable, like an egg. But are we willing to let go of our flawed little pictures and meet the true, holy, transcendent God who has actually revealed himself to us? That's the challenge that this truth leaves for every single one of us.